So for those of us who are not afraid of it, like, we got to stand to the front so that the people who are still afraid can slowly become comfortable with it and join us when they're ready.
Hello, welcome or welcome back to Sapling Tarot. My name is Imogen, and today we're back with another episode of my series The Cards Were Dealt, talking about tarot and neurodivergence. My guest today is the incredible Jasmin Aurora. I'll let her introduce herself.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jasmin. My pronouns are she, they. I am a multiply neurodivergent, disabled, chronically ill educator and researcher who's currently in the midst of doing a PhD that is focused on anti-ableist pedagogy and pre-service teachers here in Nova Scotia. So I'm zooming in or recording in from so-called Nova Scotia Mi'kma'ki, just outside of the Halifax area. And I'm also a witch. I've been an educator. This is my 14th year. I'm about 3 years into a PhD. I'm a late neurodivergent person, late diagnosis. So a physical description of myself: I am a feminine presenting person. I'm currently wearing glasses. I have a pair of headphones. I have fairly long black hair. I'm wearing a black dress that says Village Witch on it, because when you're doing these things, you should dress the part a little bit. I'm a fatter person because, again, I'm not ashamed of being neurodivergent. I'm also not ashamed of what my body looks like. And I am a white person, and so that's what I look like. Yeah, really happy to be here.
I'm thrilled to have you. Yeah, we've already been chatting quite a bit before I pressed record, and it's been an absolute treat. So, in terms of your neurodivergence, how do you identify? Are there any labels that you enjoy? Absolutely fine if not.
So I usually use the term multiply neurodivergent. There's a lot going on up there. I have multiple diagnoses. So I am the really fun ADHD OCD combo, which I think ADHD OCD combo and the AUDHDers have a lot in common in terms of rigorous structure and chaotic gremlin mode at times. My doom piles are very well organized.
Yes. Yeah.
I also have a form of synesthesia. So for folks who don't know what synesthesia is, it's the way I describe it to younger people is my senses are kind of too close together. And the way that my synesthesia affects me is I see color visualizations when I hear people's voices. Also, when I read text, so black and white text, like black text on white paper in particular, all the words are kind of color coded. So it helps when it comes to categorizing information. It doesn't help so much when it comes to kind of that sensory overload experience of someone sent a 3-page email.
Oh, God.
Now I have to decipher it, right? But yeah, I say multiple and also disabled, because the neurodivergent community is within the disability community. Like I've said before, we do have a stripe in the disability pride flag. And I think cross-movement solidarity is extraordinarily important as well. And I do identify as a witch. So I don't identify as a witch at work, because I do very happily believe and advocate for the separation of church and state when it comes to public education. And that includes my own personal belief system. Although I think some of my students are catching on a little bit to this, I'm certainly not ashamed of or worried about being out at all, coming out of the broom closet or whatever. I think I never kind of was in to begin with. I'm also identify as a pansexual person, which is also kind of late coming to that realization later on in life. So I have synesthesia, I have ADHD, OCD, and I have post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD that stems from previous traumatic experiences in my life. So there's that multiple combo. My chronic illness is manifest both physically. A lot of it, stress does incredible things to the body. I also had long COVID. So that was a fun experience of having tonsils removed at the age of 35. Wow. Don't recommend at all. But yeah, so a lot of my chronic issues manifest in a pain that comes and goes. But the chronic illness community is also involved. We're part of the disability community too. So that's how I identify, I guess. I also, to my students, I identify as a menace sometimes.
I love that.
I identify as an anti-ableist agent of chaos. And I think intersectionality is super important in terms of, and I think that identity of witch and neurodivergent, that's all part of human intersectionality, is all the little parts that make you. So
yeah, absolutely. And I think that I'm always really fascinated by the labels that people choose, because it's, yeah, I mean, I think people get caught up in the whole like kind of idea of identity politics, but I think the language we use to describe ourselves and to communicate ourselves to each other is endlessly fascinating.
I kind of live by the label you give yourself, not by the label others give you.
Yeah.
And me, the identity that the intersectionality that I have, and that I've embraced, particularly neurodivergent, disabled, and sort of that witch identity, has allowed me to be a part of community where I feel very validated and affirmed and nurtured and feel safe. So I think until society changes very drastically, I think there's always going to be a place for identifying in certain ways because we live under a system that only values certain identity.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I think kind of identity as a tool for community building is something that gets missed a lot when we talk about these sorts of labels. So your experience of neurodivergence is obviously varied, but in that way of it's all within one brain, so it's all kind of affecting one another. In terms of how it shapes your life, is that something that you can like describe?
So I was diagnosed later on with ADHD, OCD. I've always been a synesthete. I just didn't realize what it was till I probably started university, and then a professor pointed out, like, wow, you really memorized all those Roman emperors really easy. I was like, yeah, because their names are red. And he went, are you a synesthete? Because he was one. And I'm like, I don't know. So again, the community has helped me, embrace. So that's when I realized. Also, I used to like draw my ABCs as a kid. I remember the teacher wrote them on the board once, and instead of taking out a pencil, I took out crayons. And she's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "The A is red, the B is that." So there's always that thing. But my ADHD, OCD, and even embracing the fact that I have PTSD was like a huge. So it happened actually probably about 4 years ago when I first started the PhD program and was trying to figure out what I wanted to really do my research in. And at the same time, as I was experiencing an extreme amount of anxiety because it's, I'm working full time and I'm doing this. And there's like, I was identified as a very anxious person. And I call my anxiety the beehive. And it feels like right in the center of my chest, there's a big beehive. And she hums. Like it feels like a hum right in my chest. And I was going through so much anxiety, and I had a phone interview with my family doctor. And at first, she's like, okay, we're going to put you on anti anxiety medication. Cool. Problem with anti anxiety medication is it's not getting to the source of what the issue is. So I was feeling a bit, and I mean, anti anxieties, if they work for you, awesome. The anxiety was a symptom of an underlying issue, which was an entire lifetime of masking, that typical masking. And I think something that unites a lot of neurodivergent people is the overwhelming feeling of feeling alone and not feeling right.
Yeah.
And because of that, we don't know who we are. And I have always struggled my whole life up until my 30s with, I'm like, who the heck am I?
Yeah.
Like, am I this person that my family, like my mom, want me to be? Am I the person that I see on the television? Am I that? What am I? Like, what has happened? So I was given anti-anxieties, good old sertraline, which like, whew, that was doing things to my brain where I was like, wow, now I can't even do the PhD where I need to, like, I'm a zombie. I was feeling terrible. And so then I talked to my doctor again, and she's like, we talked about this for a bit. She's like, all of a sudden during our conversation, she's like, have you thought of ADHD? And of course, my internalized ableism pictured at the time, the ADHD, just like autism, is very similar. It's a white boy who's got, quote unquote, I'm doing air quotes, behaviors, bouncing off the walls. And I knew that kid because I went to public school. Yeah. So there was always that kid in the room. Let's take his Ritalin at lunch.
Yeah.
Right? And I'm like, well, I'm not that. And it's funny because even in my family, they're like, well, you're not hyperactive. If anything, you're lazy, right? Like, But so she got together with my therapist at the time, who was also slowly working through this, like trying to get me to embrace the idea of like, you have trauma that you need to address and heal from. And I'm like, forget you.
Yeah, no.
And so I did this, like, the more adult sort of questionnaire. And I just remember the amount of notes I wrote in the margins. So with the ADHD questionnaire I was given, they want to rule out things like schizophrenia and bipolar. And so one of the questions I'll never forget was like, do you hear voices? And of course, my brain's going like, so I wrote, it was like my internal monologue, or like burn the house down voices. Because I'm not those voices, right? I'm hearing like, you have to get up and brush your teeth and do those things, everything, you're so tired and all this. So I filled it out, and very quickly the doctor was like, okay, so you have ADHD, and that's pretty obvious. And
I've always thought the amount of notes you make in the margins of one of those is the diagnosis.
Right? Like, yeah, there it is. And also, like, it's interesting because you have, like, they said borderline OCD tendencies. And I'm like, okay, so it's OCD, And I do have a family member with a more distant family with obsessive compulsive disorder who has a child with diagnosed ADHD. So I'm like, okay, so there's a precedent for this within the family of these neurotypes. And yeah, so that was also, and there's a person who was in my PhD cohort who had a visible disability, and she was like, you should read this, and you should read that, and you should read these things. And I was like, whoa. And then finally I was able to, like, I know exactly what I'm going to do for my PhD, right? Because I am now, all of a sudden, I'm a neurodivergent disabled teacher who has always worked with neurodivergent disabled kids. So I am in learning support. And I'm like, something's got to give for these kids. The issue is inclusion. How do we enliven those tenets of inclusion within the pre-service teacher world of, like, how do we get teachers to leave the university and enter a classroom going, all of these kids belong? And how do I make sure that I'm not disabling students and othering students and, giving, when I say I want to include everyone, what does that mean? What does it look like? And Nova Scotia has a brand new inclusive education policy, which is really novel, but it's like, how do we make this real? It's one thing to have it on paper. It's another thing to actually do the thing. When it says we have to validate, affirm, and nurture all student identity, including disabled identities. Like, it says special needs, but it also says the word disability in it. And I'm like, so all of a sudden, are we embracing the social model of disability? Impairment is real, but what disables people is society itself, right? I'm not the one that needs curing. Society needs to adapt to the fact that all neurodiversity, we all have different brains, and of course, diversity of body. So I was, I came to this, and then I've been sort of like a witch longer than I've been disabled for. I mean, I've been disabled for my whole life now that I realize. But there's that embracing all of a sudden within the past few, I always said, like, I spent, over 30 years not knowing who I was. All of a sudden I know who I am. And that has propelled this sort of inner confidence, not just within my work and my daily life, but also within a spiritual practice. Like, I no longer feel like an imposter.
Wow, that's huge.
I think that's self-identity, and that's why self-diagnosis is so valid, and why those of us who have a medical diagnosis have a real privilege to speak to our friends and family and go, I think I have this. And I go, you probably do. Let's talk about it. Let's genuinely talk about how you feel. Because once you know who you are
and what you're working with,
you can stop apologizing for existing.
Yeah, that's huge.
Like, if you watch the documentary Crip Camp, there's a great scene where when the 504 sit-in is successful and everybody can start going home, one of the people who were being interviewed said the best part about that sit-in wasn't the fact, we got it signed, we're moving towards the 88, it was great. The best part was that it was a bunch of disabled people in a space together validating each other's experience. We're like, wow, you were institutionalized. I didn't have that experience, but I believe you.
Yeah.
I think with that, once you believe in your own lived experience as expertise,
right,
then we can bond and create community. And I think that's the same within that line between neurodivergence and witchcraft, in terms of, to be neurodivergent is, I think, an activist statement. I think knowing that the term neurodivergent was created by an activist who was concerned with creating a community so that neurodivergent people can come together and exist and not just survive but thrive in order to do the work to dismantle ableist systems. That's really important, that if we're going to take on that label of neurodivergent, that means we are actively involved in this revolution. We are actively involved in promoting disability justice as best we can. And if that just means we share stuff on Instagram, that counts, right? If that means that we're sending a text or we're correcting someone saying something ableist or sanist, that counts. If that's all you can do, that's all you can do. But it's a doing, right? It's a thing. And those of us who can do more should be doing more for the individuals who cannot do as much in the terms of like what the definition of activism kind of looks like. But I think we also need to dismantle that as well. And it's the same with witch. Being a witch is a doing, like it's a craft, right? And so if we take on that, that's a heavy label to carry. And kudos to the aesthetic witches, awesome. But for me, witchcraft is also, if I call myself a witch, then I know that as a feminine person, I am going against that patriarchal norm of be seen and not heard, be very demure, very much, to quote a beautiful trans person online, right? Like, you know, it's that whole satire, like, be very demure, very much. Like, I'm going against that. My goal as a witch is to deconstruct myself from the male gaze so that I can help others do the same, because that is a patriarchal construct that doesn't work for anybody of any gender, right? It doesn't work for cis men either. And cis men are beginning to realize that. Yeah. I think particularly those who wish to ally themselves, right? And that's why I say, like, witch is for anybody. It doesn't matter your gender identity, your sexual orientation, your disability, neurodivergence, it's for anyone. If you are interested in these things, your practice can look like however it wants. But I think my one thing that connects all of us is that it's a doing, and it's the understanding that if I am going to take on this label, I understand that I have to be part of the revolution. Like, I have to be anti-fascist. I have to be anti-ableist. I have to be anti-racist. I have to support, if I'm going to say land back here in North America, I also mean it everywhere else, right? That's what witches are about, saying enough is enough. This system doesn't work for me, and it doesn't work for the people, our coven, right? Whatever that looks like. So we're going to actively work against it. And that's really scary. So for those of us who are not afraid of it, like, we got to stand to the front so that the people who are still afraid can slowly become comfortable with it and join us when they're ready.
No, I think that's incredible. And I think that there are, you know, if people are here in my little subsection of the internet, then they know that I think all of everything is political. And so, you know, not all of my content is overtly political, but if anyone ever says to me, you know, why are you making tarot political or whatever, then it's just, you know, you're in the wrong space, yes. I'm afraid.
Was it the artist Ai Weiwei who said everything is art, everything is politics?
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think too, like, it is a privilege to know that however the world goes, you're going to be okay. I don't have that privilege. Women don't have that privilege. Disabled folks don't have that privilege. People of color don't have that privilege. Indigenous people don't have that privilege. Neurodivergent people, we do not. Most of us don't have the privilege to know.
Yeah, there's like 10 people on the planet.
Whoever's in charge, I'm going to be okay. I don't have that privilege, right? Like, my bodily autonomy does not have the privilege. It matters to me who is the leadership of my society, because that is not just my survival, that is where I thrive. And if people are only surviving, it's not enough.
Yeah.
It's not enough.
Yeah, and I think, like, our existence as, you know, as disabled people, as queer people, as neurodivergent people, as witches, as all sorts of anything is inherently political, because it goes against so much of the structure that we live around. And, you know, if we're talking about tarot being a personal process, and if our personal is political, then tarot is inherently political, because it's a tool, it's an ally for our own, whether you're more in the camp of
it was outlawed historically. And in the States, there's at least one individual right now who's like opened a witch shop and then has to go to court. Like, this is a practice. Like, a lot of these witchcraft rituals and practices were outlawed. And technically, if you look at these old, some of them still are.
Oh yeah, like in Britain, I have to be like, this is entertainment purposes only, because we still technically have witch laws. And, you know, there are countries all over the world that, you know, you could get in. I was talking to someone the other day who, like, could lose their job, and they're not even like kind of out here being like, oh yeah, I'm a witch. They're just like, I'm interested in tarot, and that would be sufficient.
Yeah, I think to understand that, I think before anyone like takes on, it's just to understand the like I'm really into ancestral worship, so like understand the ancestry of these things. Like there's a weight behind that. There's a weight behind the word neurodivergent. There's a weight behind tarot. There's a weight behind the witch that not everybody is ready to carry, and that's okay. Like it's still there for you, but I always say, like, just make sure you are able to carry that weight. And that might mean that you connect with other people, that you work on yourself a bit. And also with tarot, like, again, like I've said before, it's that gatekeeping, which I think the internet's great for connecting people, clearly, it's how we connected, but it's also terrible for gatekeeping, particularly witchcraft practices nowadays. Like you have witch talk and all the stuff that, I remember seeing a video of like, this is witch aesthetic. And I'm like, the things that this individual is wearing cost thousands of dollars. I don't know about you, but I'm a paycheck to paycheck witch, right? Like I'm like I can't afford a $500 brimmed hat. Like I don't know. Like I don't have a house. I'm a renter. So, but same with tarot. It's like I think we understand that tarot comes from a card game, first of all, and there should be a level of like, yeah, we can use it to guide us, but we also understand, like, we have to take everything with a bit of a grain of salt here. And I think that spirituality and faith and scientific reality have to be able to kind of coexist. But faith can never usurp that scientific reality. Like, if you're making major life decisions based on a card that you turn, like for me, that I couldn't do that. That would be very worrisome. So I use tarot personally in my everyday life of like, let's like self-reflect, or maybe if I flip things, it's like, oh, like today I flipped like the Ace of Pentacles, which is the reminder of like focus in. I'm like, yeah, I should probably get back to working on my literature. If you know what I mean? Like it's just that subtle. I use it more of like that subtle, and of course with my obsessive compulsive, I like ritualistic things. And I find with witchcraft, it's a ritualistic process that's not harmful to me.
Yeah.
And it's something that I've made that conscious decision of like, if tarot, like any other practice, becomes harmful, where like I do, like, oh, I have to look at tarot or else the world's gonna end, then I have to stop doing it.
Yeah. I think that's very wise.
Now, and so right now, like I look at tarot as like, it's a way to manifest for me sort of a weekly or daily or sometimes once a month, a practice where I kind of can reconnect to. I always explain it like I explain sort of the mystery of life that we have, that science hasn't explained yet. That's the avatar I put on the mystery.
Okay.
Some people call the avatar Jesus Christ. Some call it whatever you want to call it. For me, it's like there's multiple deities. Most are feminine. Tarot is a part of connecting to that and also connecting to ancestors. So, but yeah, it's an avatar of the mystery. I don't really know what it is.
Oh, yeah.
Like, one of my principal deities is Freya. Do I actually think she's a real thing? I don't know. But like, it works for me because I don't believe in patriarchal dogma. As someone who is both multiply neurodivergent disabled, and I inhabit a feminine body, and I'm happily an intersectional feminist, and I talk about these things. I can't. There's too much for my own brain. Cognitive dissonance between aligning with a religion run by men. I don't hate masculinity. What I don't like is patriarchy. And so as a witch, I can't align with patriarchy. Like I think that's just, there's too much cognitive dissonance. Like I'm sure people can prescribe to dogma and do witchcraft, but for me, it just doesn't work with how my brain works. It's like I can't vote for a conservative either. Like it doesn't make sense in my head that as someone who looks and thinks the way I do, like I can't vote for those people because they don't align with what I want. So yeah, I think that's part of the neurodivergent in understanding like, well, yeah, my brain has a really fixed idea of like what I believe in, my values, and it's always sort of more of the progressive, like subversive ideas, and they change and flux a little bit because I learn and unlearn things from people. But it's usually never going back to like traditional patriarchy. It's usually going further. Like I learned about disability studies, and then I was introduced to MAD studies, and I'm like, whoa, that's even more like the idea of like the psychiatric industrial complex. So when I view tarot, I always say like, well, is this reading currently helping me, or I never charge people for tarot because I'm not I'm not a specialist, and I have, but with friends and family, they ask me, and I think that neurodivergent pattern recognition,
Yeah.
right, like you can read people. That's really what it is. It's a vessel. Tarot I see as a vessel to read an individual or a group of individuals,
It's a
right?
prompt. It's a prompt.
Yeah, it's an absolute prompt, and I think my ADHD brain loves a prompt,
Yeah.
and so I like doing it. But then it's like, you pull the Tower card and the Tower. And the Tower card is one of my favorite cards because I always talk about taking down the ivory tower,
Yeah.
and I'm like, that's the exact visualization I'm looking for in terms of like whether I'm reading it for myself or I'm reading for another person. I'm like, this is good.
Yeah.
This Tower card is asking you to recognize those patterns in your life that are recognizing your own internal ivory tower, that hierarchy that you have put yourself under, and you continue to try to subscribe to, even though it's not working for you, right? I see the towers; it's a mask, right? You're gonna unmask. You're gonna take that tower down brick by brick, and in its place, you don't build another tower. You build something completely different,
Yeah.
or you let the area wild itself,
Yeah.
right?
Oh, I love
It's
that
not
image.
about it's not about putting a new tower in place. It's not about flipping who's in charge. It's about destroying the entire way that hierarchical down to up kind of deal. Like we it is I don't think it is a natural thing. Like a tower isn't a natural structure, right? So we should be able to do with it what we will. And it's a very jarring image.
Yeah.
But it's the thing with people when they look at the devil card, right? Where I'm
Yeah.
like, but the devil is, again, it's this subversive character that's like, listen, like, whether you subscribe to like the Christian idea of the devil or like in Hungarian
Yeah, like
paganism,
the
there's
folkloric devil.
the folkloric devil Ordog, right? Where
Yeah.
in pre-Christian Hungary, there was the idea of like Ordog and Isten, the god and the devil. They actually created everything together.
Yeah.
And Ordog is how we kind of get that satyr look, right? Of like, and then there's also like, the horn god and stuff. But I love the story because he stirs a big cauldron of souls, but nobody quite knows if the souls are like the best, or it's just like a concept like the underworld where it's everybody, right? It's like, we're in Yule time, so it's like Krampus.
Yeah.
Like, Krampus is the necessary balance of like, yeah, like life isn't always reward, and you have to be a decent human being. Like, and I'm here to guide you, through these, and that's so there has to be. It's like which is some of we do shadow work, right? And I find so the devil card when I pull it, it reminds me like there's a balance that you're either doing really well or it needs to be restored. Like recognize what you want. Like don't take yourself so seriously. Recognize what you want because like the kind of pre-Christian idea of the devil, he's kind of he's a trickster. Like he's goofy a little bit, right? Like
I love that.
up for a good he or they're up for a good time, right? It's almost that Dionysian figure of like they're up for a good time, but also defend yourself, right? And I'm always commented at work. People always say like, "Wow, you're so like chilled out," and I'm like, "Don't mistake my confidence for being a doormat, though." Because like I choose what hills to die on,
Yeah.
and a lot of hills aren't worth it. But if I come up across a hill, that you better believe.
Yeah.
So yeah, these kind of spookier cards. I guess is a more spooky witch. I guess for me, I really like is it's that really stark reminder of like not everything's sunshine and rainbows, and it really shouldn't be. It is okay to feel bad. With neurodivergent people, there's always that push to cure.
Yeah.
And then with that, you also have that toxic positivity. And then through there, you have inspiration porn, which really is ableist against our community. It's like, oh, well, if this autistic kid can do this, what excuse do I have? And it's that whole, we all had it in school.
What's your excuse?
Yeah, and that's that idea of grit and growth mindset, which are also ableist because it doesn't take into account socioeconomic oppression, racism, ableism, sex, the fact that the system is actively working against so many people. So for me, it's like you can't just will happiness. Like happiness happens, but a really great book by Dr. J. Logan. I forget how to say their last name. Smile. It's Smilges, I believe. They wrote crypt negativity. Yeah, disability is a neutral experience. Neurodivergence is a neutral experience, just like it is to not be like. There will be times where you feel bad. There will be times where you feel good. And I would say, like, disability justice is also for disabled people who want to be cured and who don't want to be disabled anymore.
Yeah.
Like, if I could choose to, I would absolutely get rid of this chronic pain issue. Like, for sure. I don't want it. Right. And so it's something that, like, pride, I don't think, especially like disability pride, it doesn't necessarily mean, well, I'm happy about who I am all the time. It's just, I'm okay with this. And I'm also okay with not feeling good sometimes. And I think tarot is a really good reflection of, like, not everything's peachy keen, happy go lucky sunshine and rainbows. And it shouldn't be, because life is an experience of all the things. The difference is, how do we, in community with each other, ensure that whatever our baseline is, we're going to be okay, right? So when the high times come, we're going to be okay, and the low, we're still going to be all right together, right? And certain days you feel like you're thriving, certain days you're just surviving. That counts, right? I always say, like, sometimes the altar has to collect dust. That's also not doing witchcraft is witchcraft, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's rest, the NAP ministry says the best rest is resistance. And not just resting to recharge your batteries to go hustle again.
But just resting for resting's sake.
It's just resting. And that's, the system turns it into concepts like quiet quitting, where I'm like, I'm just literally doing what my contract tells me to do.
Yeah, I never really understood that.
Again, it's that, how does ableist oppression appear in those things? And I think in terms of within the witchcraft community and the tarot reading community, I think we have to be really careful about how we're gatekeeping tarot, because it doesn't belong to anybody. Like, if it's an open practice, people should be, and to just say, well, here's the history of tarot, Italian card game, right? Here's the history of tarot. Learn how to play Scopa, and then you'll learn more about tarot, right? It's fun. But here's the history. Cool. By all means, do with it what you will, right? And I'm a total believer in bodily and, like, body-mind autonomy, both, where I'm like, you can choose to do these things, you can choose not to do these things. Anytime I read for a friend, I say, like, again, take this all with a grain of salt, but if it helps, it helps.
Yeah.
If it doesn't, whatever. We have to stop taking these practices so seriously, especially if they were rooted in, like, gameplay, right?
Yeah.
But it's absolutely, I think it's an anchor for a lot of us in terms of anchoring us to our identity as either witches or weirdos, whatever you want to call yourself, right? Spiritual people. But then if someone asks, like, oh, how do you read tarot? I think as a teacher, like, I don't teach tarot, but I teach a lot of other things. My thing is, there's a difference between being an authority and an authoritarian. Right? And it's like, my job is to guide the educational process. I am not responsible in telling you how to learn, right?
Yeah.
I am simply there to offer you the learning, and your brain is going to absorb that however it wants.
Yeah, to facilitate the information.
Yeah. And I think, like, I've gone to tons of tarot readers, and they've all been really amazing in terms of kind of laying that pre-foundation. Like, well, before I read, just let you know, this is what it may look like. Like, some people don't do reversals. I don't do reversals. This is why. And I love that sort of preamble, especially as a neurodivergent person, because before I came to you as my tarot reader, I've already had 5,000 thoughts about how this thing could go, right? And I'm already going, she's going to tell me my dad's going to die or something. You know what I mean? Something like that. So it's nice to work with the people who are like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. It's just going to be a nice reading. And I'm like, perfect. Because why would anybody want to take on that responsibility of, huge life news? I'm like, and I tell friends, when do not ask me anything that you, like, I can't remember how I put it, but I would say, don't ask questions that you are not ready to hear what you don't want to hear.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it's like when you have a conversation with a good friend, and you know they're a good friend because you can call them out on their BS. If you are not ready for the cards to call you out on your BS, that is not a question you want to ask the cards.
Yeah, if you're not ready for the answer, then, like, don't.
Any answer, right? Like, good or bad. Where it's like, oh, am I going to find love this year? And the card's like,
Tower, devil.
Yeah. Or it's like, Tower, like, find love in yourself first. And then you could talk about finding outward love. Or maybe romantic love's not. Like, you have to think of all those things, because I don't want to take on that. I don't think anybody would want to take on that responsibility. And I feel like anyone who claims to read tarot, who's like openly willing to take on these huge emotional burdens for other people, that's like, I don't know, that's a lot of work to take on unless you have a background in therapy and especially mental health literacy. Because like, you never know, someone could ask a question, and my thing is, I don't want to trigger anybody. As someone who has PTSD, the last thing I want to do is trigger your PTSD, especially if we haven't prepared for that in mutual connections, right? So, but I love tarot. I love tarot, and of course, as a neurodivergent, it's become one of my, like, I collect things, right? Like, we're all kind of crows on the inside. So now I have like multiple decks. Some decks I've connected with really well, and other decks I have, and I don't want to get rid of them, but I'm not like, I'm not as connected with you. So like, if my god kids ask, can you read tarot? Like, I'll take out my last unicorn deck. Like, I'm not connected to that deck, but it's a fun little movie and it's more kid friendly. So I'm like, okay, and I'll read, But and then there are other decks that I'm really connected to that I wouldn't take out on a first encounter because they read far too real. What I mean, so you have to kind of judge your audience as well as the cards that you're comfortable with.
Definitely. I only have one deck really that I use for professional readings because I trust it to be truthful, but not to punch anyone too hard in the face. There are some quite like confronting images in it, but the art style it's slightly kind of Disney-ish, and so it just smooths the edge off for if I'm doing like Devil Ten of Swords.
I went to a tarot reader, she was great, and she's like, this is my professional deck. She's like, this is my work deck, right? Where I'm like, and it is, it's kind of, it's like with anything, and if you think to like a lot of different, especially like in Catholicism, because, my mother was raised Catholic, I wasn't, but like, there's the idea of like putting power into things like a rosary, right? Or like the communion wafer, body and blood of Christ.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same concept of like, witchcraft is intention. Tarot is a practice, which is intention, right? So it's like, what do I intend to do with this deck of cards, right? And I think that's a very responsible practice is, well, this deck of cards is just for me, right? And this deck of cards is when I'm with like my really close, like people who are on the level, maybe. And then this deck is for like clients, if you're a person who that's part of your job. And then maybe this is like the kid friendly, or whatever. I think I really like that because again, it creates that accessible space for both the person reading and the client receiving the read, because especially I find people who go to tarot readers and they're open to it, they're not necessarily all witches, but they are very open to like.
Yeah, there's a curiosity, isn't there?
Yeah, there's like an intuition and vibes. And my biggest thing is like, if the vibes are off, as the kids say, I probably won't read tarot that day. Like sometimes you just need a day of rest. And I was told by a good friend who's a very good tarot reader, you gotta let the cards rest too sometimes. Like, it's enough.
Yeah.
Especially how I read is I shuffle till they start to pop out. And then I just kind of intuitively flip them and see what they have to say. So part of that is with my ancestral practice is like I have dialogue with the deceased loved ones. And I'm like, all right, people, like this is what we're doing right now. Feel free to interject, right? And so they'll fall out or whatever. And that's how I do it. But yeah, it's tarot again. It's a tool. Right? It's a tool that you can put whatever, I think you can put a meaning on it if that and I think that meaning, it starts off as pretty neutral. And that's, I think, really important is the neutrality of feeling of things, because it's okay to like have a shitty time.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay, right? There has to be a distance of like the ebb and flow. And that's why I also do like shadow work in my practice is I have to sit with my negative feelings and not escape. And I think that's also part of healing from trauma is like, oh yeah, okay, this is happening right now. Like I'm having a panic attack, whatever. This is happening. And not only do I have to learn how to sit with it, I have to teach the people who love me and who I'm with, like my intimate partner, how to also help me. Like, these are what my access needs are. And I think that's the same with tarot is I always do kind of a self-evaluation before I pick up a deck is like, yeah, do I actually want to read tarot or do I feel like I have to because right? It's like any like Yule celebration. Do I have to do the 12 days of Yule or do I just feel like sleeping? Like, you do it, and I'm a proponent of like, you do whatever you want. because being a witch is so much more than just the practice. It's also about like existing unapologetically, um, and also constantly being a student.
Yeah.
So even those of us who have some sort of expertise there, it's still that. I think there's a humility behind the term witch, where it's that humble thing of like, yeah, I'm really good at these things. I'm very confident, but I also know that there's always something to learn.
Yeah.
And I love being a perpetual student. It's probably why I'm doing a PhD now. Because there's also that like sloughing off of responsibility all the time, right? And I think that's important, that balance of ebb and flows. Sometimes in terms of tarot, I will lead the cards, and sometimes the cards will lead me. It depends on the situation. It also, and sometimes I let, like if I'm reading for someone, I'm like, here, you shuffle until they pop out.
Yeah.
I have to do it. You do it. It's your reading, right? You do the work, right? And that's kind of cool too. And then just to have like a nice, comfy dialogue of like, oh, I pulled like, I really like using. I'll show you. So this is one that I use with friends called the Wandering Star Tarot by
Oh,
Kat
I really
Pierce.
like that deck.
It's
Yeah.
very like Art Deco style. Kat Pierce added. I find this is my most accessible deck. We're talking about accessibility and disability because it has a yes and no card in it, which is really nice. But also, every single card, it not only has a great book with quotes, which we all love a good quote, every single card has the keywords of what that card means written on it. So I'm holding up the Seven of Wands right now, which has the words challenge and courage, right?
Yeah, it's
Besides
good for
this
that.
beautiful visual, but it's really nice. I would say if people are getting into this, I kind of wish I had this deck from the start, as opposed to this is one of my newest decks, because it's so accessible in the sense of like guiding, like, okay, so you pulled the courage and challenge card. So like, clearly there's something going on. Maybe you're thinking like you're challenged with thinking or doing, but it's the idea of like keep going, because you have to be able to you have to not only pick a choice, like make a choice, but then be confident in that choice that you made.
Yeah.
Okay? So yeah, it's a really nice deck. And then I also love the Crow Tarot. I pull the Crow Tarot. So Crow Tarot every week I do my own readings with. And then of course like the Missing Witches deck of oracles, where I pull one card a week. It's a really beautiful deck. I'll hold it up. Shout out to Amy and Risa.
Yeah, always Amy and Risa.
And who connected us, which is really cool. Talk about community building. My first deck was the Wildwood Tarot, which is like a fascinating way to jump into tarot with
Yeah, absolutely.
non-traditional tarot deck. And the reason why I picked it, I was like, I'm gonna get into this. I was like, so I went to the bookstore, and of course, there's always an esoteric tarot section at the bookstore that's way in the back.
Yeah, you could blow all the
God
dust
forbid
off everything.
Yeah, right. And I saw it, and I was looking at all the tarot decks. Of course, they had like the traditional decks and stuff. And I'm like, ooh, this one has animals in it.
Yeah, yeah.
My love it. I was like, what's this one? And I take it, and totally it's not the traditional like pentacle or whatever. But that's really the deck that I started with, and that sort of started the ball rolling. And some of the newest decks, I have the D&D tarot deck, which is kind
Cute,
of
yeah.
cool, and the Samhain tarot deck. So I think it's Juliet Diaz, and I forget the other person, but they've done a tarot deck for every Sabbath.
Yes.
Slowly trying to find the others. But the Samhain one, there's one. I think it's the Devil card. I'm going to assume, but it's Baba Yaga. Like it's really creepy. It's Banshee, but it's a really scary looking card that I hate pulling. And I've only pulled it twice ever. And I'm like, no, I have to pull a different card because I can't put it on my altar because it's gonna freak me out every time.
That's totally fair.
I'm like, it's too scary. Like I love horror, but I can't walk into my office where I have my altar with the lights off and then see these like two little eyes. I'm like, no,
Not with
we're
the lights off, no. Yeah, that's too much. Oh, those are some great decks. Yeah, thank you so much for this. This has been really great, and I would be really excited to talk again soon. So that's the end of part 1 of my discussion with the amazing Jasmin. I considered putting them all into one video, but it would be just a little bit mammoth. So please stick around for part 2. I hope you're taking really good care of yourself, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye!